Hey guys, and welcome back to Yugioh Everything. My name is Pete, and welcome back to the little segment on this channel we like to call Legacy Reviews. If you've not been by the channel before, or you've never seen this segment, welcome. This is a segment on the channel where I review the first 3 shows of Yugioh, the original trilogy, in sequential order, so obviously being Duel Monsters, GX, and 5Ds, and I give my thoughts for hopefully you guys to enjoy out there. I can do that because I've never seen the shows before. I started with VRAINS, if you've been by the channel. The 6th show, that was my first show, and so I decided to jump back into the 3 original shows. Those kind of had the most appeal to me at the moment, and so I decided to take them on at the same time. So I've never seen the show. I have no idea what's about to happen, so it hopefully makes the theories and predictions I have going forward and kind of my feelings in that moment kind of very fresh. Kind of take for you guys whether to relive it with me or to watch it for the first time as I am. Guys, with that out of the way, this week we are doing episode 14 of the series, so I'm going to start off and kick us off here with Duel Monsters episode 14, so I'll be right back. Alright guys, so welcome back to the Duel Monsters side of the review. To kick this off, episode 14, this is called Pitch Black Duel, Castle of Dark Illusions, and properly named here for this episode as we are dealing in the shadows. Guys, if I also sound different, I apologize for that. I'm recording this review while I am pretty sick in my house right now and I'm home, so I apologize for that, but still want to get these reviews out for you guys, and I also enjoy watching the episode, so it felt kind of right. But yeah, this was an okay episode. You know, it wasn't anything too entirely special. At least, you know, we figured out what happened to Maye. You know, the episode kicks right off with, you know, catching us up with, you know, the end of the record duel and Maye getting taken away by that very large man with a duel glove. We see that he's a terrifying figure. He's huge. He's got these glowing white eyes behind the shadows. He beat all the harpies of Maye, and she loses. I guess that was, you know, the wager. I guess she couldn't wager, you know, only 2 starships. She wagered all 8 starships. She's eliminated. She's supposed to be kicked off the island. That's it. And so you see the, you know, our 5 here, adding Bakura now to the group, running over to, you know, see the situation. You know how powerful Maye has been. Yes, did she lose to Jinochi? Sure. But you see, she's been doing quick work. She was only 2 stars away from getting into the castle herself. So for her to be taken out and seemingly taken out in pretty easy fashion, definitely showed me right off the bat where I was like, okay, well, this guy, he's something to be a threat. And he reminded me very much in, I think that was, what, episodes 5 and 6 in GX, when you had that very, like, fake shadow duelist that was dueling Judai with, you know, Asuka, you know, in the coffin there. Very much like that, where it seems like a very mercenary-like character. We've seen one that impersonated Kaiba a few episodes ago that worked for Pegasus at, you know, Industrial Illusions. This is not that. He's not trying to impersonate someone. He's something called a player killer. And so his job is literally, he's hired by the company. He goes around the island. There's a few of them there, and they seek out players, especially the most powerful players. They take all their star chips. That's why his dual glove is bigger and has more room for star chips. And it's just a way, I guess, to weed out kind of the weaklings that Pegasus doesn't want to fight. I would imagine that's kind of the idea behind it. And also, probably most of these player killers are sick son of a bees, so they have no problem. They probably get sick enjoyment out of taking out what are probably most of the time kids and teens. So even if it's adults, they probably enjoy causing the misery in others. And we see, you know, when he kind of makes fun of Maye and says that she whines, and he's very harsh to her. We see Jinochi have a little bit of a reaction there because obviously he's a little bit sweet on Maye as well. Yugi immediately, you know, changes to other Yugi. He kind of he takes the duel. He's proud. He's confident of it. The whole group recognizes that, and it goes, you know, right into him facing the giant there in the ring that Maye just lost all 8 of her starships. He bets all 6 of his starships because obviously he had 2 less. You know, kind of Jinochi's fault of why he hasn't already made it to the castle, but, you know, that's here nor there. They're friends and they stick together. And when he bets it, to kind of up the ante and be like, oh, hey, I just won 8 star chips, because he's trying to get Maye her star chips back as well as defeat this player killer, the player killer decides to do something where I guess this is where you wouldn't see probably something like this in the dub. is where there's fire, two cannons shooting fire at Yugi from either side. He could easily aim it at him, and he'll aim it at him if he tries to run. Seemingly, if he loses, Yugi will literally die and burn to death. So this is the first time I think that we're seeing more stakes of life or death. Yes, you could have said that, hey, last duel, when that shadow duelist that took over Bakura, you could say, oh, right there, that was life or death for your soul. True, but this is like, in reality, this is, you know, someone who is seemingly not going to be a main character. Yeah, we're just putting, hey, the duel stipulations are literally life and death. So the first time we're seeing that, as far as I can remember in the show, and Yugi kind of calls out not liking kind of anyone that works for Pegasus, and he points out the player killer that, yeah, Pegasus is not individually giving us any assignments, we just work for the greater company, and so probably the memo that went out is for all of them to go over. He doesn't have kind of the privilege to get personal words there from Pegasus. You know, Yuki, he's saying basically he's overestimating himself that he would be that important. But, you know, Yuki still has continual confidence. The duel starts, and right away, that's where things go bad, because the player killer starts talking about the darkness on the island, and that you have to be careful, that the shadows can attack you, and Yugi goes, oh, you know, well, that's, you know, kind of pathetic that, you know, and cowardly that you're going to attack people from the shadows during the night. Like, what kind of person does that? But it fits more with his deck and what he is about. And so he summons, you know, the duel starts, and he summons the castle that creates all, you know, all the shadows on the field. And prevents, you know, and very cheap, you know, we've seen this here early on in this Duelist Kingdom arc that people warned me about, is it's very cheap that he has shadows only on his side of the field. You can't see any of the cards he puts down, any of the monsters. You have no idea. You're literally getting attacked from the shadows. It's completely unfair and completely cheap, and it shows how he can be winning these duels very much like that mercenary duelist in GX. He won that by doing fake, you know, kind of shadow duels, that you thought your body was fading away and that you were having less and less control. Easily that kind of mind tricks, because they ended up not being real, that could throw an opponent off, and that's why he was able to defeat people time and time again, because he had the psychological advantage. This is not only a psychological advantage, but it's a physical advantage in the duel game, because your opponent literally can't see what you're doing. It's like when you play a, usually it's a PC game, where you're playing a strategy game or something, and you have the fog of war on, and so you can't see your opponent's movements of their troops and what they're doing. Very similar to that, kind of reminded me of that completely. You know, so he's here, he's dueling, Yugi starts talking about the honor of the duelist, and he summons the Castle of Dark Illusions, and that's what creates the entire field. His monsters start chewing Yugi's monsters to pieces, even though they're in defense positions. And the animation and the sounds in this episode of when Yugi's monsters are dying is just horrific. It's brutal. I love it. But it's almost like their monsters are going inside one of those car compactors, like when you're in a junkyard and like they smush the cars down. That's what it sounds like these bodies are going through, like the monsters' bodies that Yugi has on the field. That's what it sounds like, as the shadows swallow them whole, and just to see the dark piercing white eyes that come through the shadows, that's really the only thing Yugi can really see. Yugi's voice can affect the player killers, and we'll see that more here. I'll talk about that more as the review goes on, but nothing else, and Yuki's at a complete disadvantage, as he seems to be in almost every single duel he's in. So Celtic Guardian goes down. I think one of Yugi's Dragon #1 goes down, but Bakura, while everyone is freaking out, Bakura is kind of... even without the shadow duelist in him, he knew the group beforehand. That seemed to be clear, and he clearly knows what he's doing. He is probably a very competent duelist, I imagine, and he's the one that kind of has the most rational and logical thoughts as the duel's going on. He's the one that points out that Yugi can use his words as a weapon, almost to stir up and trick the player killer, and that's exactly what he does later on. It's Bakura that points that out when, Anzu and Jinochi and Honda are flipping out there. Mai, to some degree, says some things, but it's really Bakura that is the voice of the reason. So I thought that was a very interesting part, that if they have him kind of join the group here officially, I would really like to see how his dynamic works, I think, with the rest of the other characters, particularly not even Yugi, but particularly Jinochi being the other kind of main duelist, the only duelist out of this group that we've seen so far. I kind of want to see how they bounce things off of each other. But the episode goes on, and, he's talking about, hey, it's all or nothing, they're hiding in the shadows. And Yugi gets this idea that, hey, he uses his dragon, that he shoots a fireball in there to quickly see what the monsters look like. It literally, the light illuminates some of the shadows, but I guess it's not good enough to really get an assessment or a quick enough look to see what kind of monsters this player killer is using. And so Yugi gets the idea to not only use his words kind of against him, as I said, to trick the player killer, but he had a card in his deck that is like swords that kind of that it's supposed to be I believe a spell card that's supposed to light up the entire field and make it, he's not able to attack for 3 turns, but it's also supposed to light up the entire field, get rid of the shadows, and Yuki could actually see what the player killer is doing. So I enjoy that point when he says, oh, the sun rises in the morning, he figures it out, that's when your shadows disappear. So at first I was like, oh, he's gonna stall for the duel, but no, he had his trump card, as he says. That's how he figured out the situation, and he keeps riling this player killer, who you would think would be probably more experienced in these situations. He's easily taken in by other Yugi, and he's easily fooled, and that other Yugi keeps saying, yeah, you only have 5 turns left. That's all you have. We're going to show that darkness. It's going to be brought out into the light. Everyone is wondering, what could he possibly be wanting, what possible move could he be making here to bring it out of him and defeat him. And as the player kill goes on, he goes, okay, well, you're a fool. You revealed what card it is to me. I know exactly what you're going to do. He goes to attack that card, and it ends up not being a spell card, which is what he had with the Grim Reaper card that we saw last episode with Bakura, that was actually in the graveyard when their souls went there and would take them away and they would die permanently. This player killer had that card. It was called Swords Revealing Light. That was the card. But he had that card in his deck, and Yugi predicted that he would have that card in his deck. I guess because not only he just thought of it, he just heard about it, but also a player of this character that's dealing in the shadows and dealing in a dark style deck, that's probably a typical card that you would imagine. It's a pretty good bet that he would have that card. And so he uses, I believe, Spellbinding Circle. He uses a trap card that negates him to be able to use the Reaper, so he's able to drop his spell card on the field, and then he is going to use the Swords of Revealing Light. So I thought it was a very, very smart move by Yugi to use his literal words to trick the opponent. All the time he's facing, these insurmountable obstacles, these completely unfair circumstances. So it was nice to kind of turn it around, and you know what? Don't play necessarily fair, and be confident, but also be straight up lying and tricking your opponent. I really did love that, and he completely falls for it. And the episode goes. I didn't think at first it was going to be a 2-episode duel. I really thought it was going to be kind of a 1-episode duel. Mai would get her star chips back, and we would just kind of move on with kind of our adventure here of getting to Pegasus Castle, because this feels very much like, hey, we're having another situation where we're stopping and having one of these side quests, but whatever, we're building up Mai's character and seeing what other dangers on the island. That's totally fine. Yugi sets 3 cards on the field, which all could be spell cards, they could be trap cards, they could be face down monsters. Who has any idea what's about to happen? And that's how the episode ends. The player killer is completely on the ropes, has no idea what's going on, what he's going to see, and I really I kind of enjoyed seeing him in a little bit of peril there. But he was kind of a cool character, as much as you could argue that he was cowardly. So kind of, guys, that's kind of my thoughts here on episode 14 of Duel Monsters. Not like a huge development in this episode. Definitely feels very much like a side quest, but it's interesting to kind of flesh out the world and see what other tricks Pegasus has up his sleeves and other types of decks and kind of ridiculous tricks that seem to be going on, craziness that don't seem to be part of the normal rules here in Duelist Kingdom. Let me know what you guys thought of this episode down below. No spoilers, obviously, but I would love to hear your predictions and thoughts as we wrap up next week in episode 15, this two-parter of the duel, guys. I'm going to switch over to GX for the second part of the review, so I'll be right back. All right, guys, welcome back to the GX side of the review. This episode 14, is called Verse Jinzo, and it's kind of just another weird GX episode. I feel like all of these episodes, I'm sure you guys can agree with, are just weird here. I know people tell me it gets a little more serious and cohesive as a story going down the line here in season 1, but for now we're in kind of wacky kooky land still. So this episode mainly deals with, we're basically on winter break where most people go home, and of course our main characters here, the main one being Judai, hang out and are kind of just dueling whatever, wherever they want, and doing whatever they want, even with their teacher still here and his cat Pharaoh during the winter break. They're hanging out, they're having fun, then all of a sudden, I assume he's a teacher from Obelisk Blue, but maybe he's an upperclassman student, so you guys can let me know down below. Kind of comes running in terrified. This is more of like a horror episode, and I love that, like, he can't just knock on the door, like he somehow broke through the glass doors there and just smashed into the place. I mean someone's gonna have to pay for that and fix that, so I thought that was pretty funny. And he basically tells a story of him and a couple other either students or teachers that are, they were part of some like occult club, and they summoned what they believe is an evil spirit, dueling spirit in Jinzo, and Jinzo has to have some history in this universe, because immediately Judai show, Hayato, everybody knows what this character is talking about. I believe his name is Takidera or something like that. And they know what he's talking about. He seems like later in the episode that he is a card himself, and so he definitely has an established history there. But when he does the background story of talking about how he believes his other two conspirators kind of have disappeared, which it seems to be the case, that he wasn't lying, that everything was real. Nothing happens good, guys, when you're using a Ouija board. That's usually just a recipe for disaster. So he gets kind of literally just kidnapped. I mean, Jinzo comes in, you think he's like just a spirit, so he wouldn't be tangible in the physical universe, but he somehow can literally put this man over his shoulder. He was haunting him, didn't let him get onto the ferry, and then steals the man right out of the dorm that they were in. They go to the electrical area of the island, and you see kind of Jinzo's spirit kind of manifest, and it's very intangible, like you could see through him. And I thought that was a really cool effect that they did throughout the episode, and then later switched it when he became a card himself. I thought that stuff was really cool. The duel itself was pretty entertaining. I mean, usually for me, when Judai duels, I think it is very entertaining, and I'm not usually expecting like what is going to happen. I think he has a lot of tricks up his sleeve, where I'm not taking any shots at Yugi or Yusei for that matter, but there's just something about his dueling style for the first 14 episodes that I'm always on kind of the edge of my seat, and I really like what he does with his heroes and the mix of cards he has, and kind of, bubble wrap, or when he has Pot of Greed or emergency provisions, which he used all 3 of those in this episode. I really do enjoy that, and I think the back and forth between him and Jinzo was good. Jinzo was genuinely terrifying. It was definitely a horror-filled more episode, which I really enjoyed. They had more of a serious tone here in this episode. I wish that the music was a little bit more horror, kind of organ-filled. There was a lot of moments in key, like supposed to be terrifying, scary moments of the episode, that the music and the orchestra behind it didn't really hit as much for me as I wished it did. But seeing some cards like the ectoplasma card that Jinzo had, I thought was pretty interesting. And like later when he manifests himself as a card, but also when he takes over the body of Takidera, or you guys could correct me with the pronunciations as always down below. I thought that was a really creepy, unsettling scene. His eyes are red, and you know, that's the way that he had to manifest himself, because I guess once he was destroyed as a card and he tried to bring himself back, we also see Call of the Haunted as a card here, which I thought was really cool in this episode. I thought that he would go back to that intangible form he had at the beginning of the duel, and it seemingly he couldn't do that, which I thought was pretty interesting. The duel goes on, it's really shots back and forth, and it's really Judai putting down 4 face-down cards, which ended up being spell and traps. He uses all of them throughout the duel, and that really ends up saving him, especially Bubble Wrap. He's able to bring, you know, polymerization back to his hand. He puts Bubble Man and Clay Man together, and you know, he creates Mudball Man, and that's able to finish off the duel and kind of keep Jinzo at bay. We also saw what was the other card that he used with the Solomon card, I believe it's called. Let me see what it is. The Solomon Judgment card. I had to go back and look there for a second, which I really like. I remember Dylan did a video series once on that. So I really thought that was a really enjoyable, or maybe he talked to me about it, about doing a video series, whatever it was. I thought that was a really cool card to come back, any of those God cards, I thought, and it finished off Jinzo. Interesting part, though, they wake up, you know, the teachers or upperclassmen, whatever, you know, those occult members were, they're all knocked out. We get Judai and the kind of the crew comes back, and they all fall asleep, and it's morning, and they have kind of a discussion whether, hey, was this real or was this not real? And I thought that part was kind of pretty interesting, but they definitely declare there that they believe the situation was real, and then Judai, kind of in classic fashion, they all believe in the dual spirits, but says, you know, it was fun. Him possibly, you know, playing a shadow game there and having his life taken by some evil spirit, he finds fun, and that just kind of fits with Judai's character. But guys, that was kind of my thoughts there on episode 14 of GX versus Jinzo. You know, kind of what I expect from GX these days. You know, you just crazy, wacky episodes, seemingly one-off characters all the time, and until anything changes, that's going to be the norm around here. I'm going to go switch off for the final part of the review of 5D's episode 14, so I'll be right back. Alright guys, and welcome back to the final part of episode 14's legacy review. This is obviously episode 14 of 5D's Bringer of Folklore Destruction, Black Rose Witch Appears. And man, you know what, I don't want to spend a ton of time on these episodes. I really want to kind of shorten them down, but when things need to be talked about, they need to be talked about. And this is another episode which is really a setup, right? Like, no official dueling between any of our main characters actually ended up happening. Nothing crazy, right? We had a couple duels where it looked like, you know, Himuro and Yusei were going to go against each other, and then boom, Jack interrupts. And that maybe, you know, Lua was going to get involved, or his friend Tempeh, and nothing happened there. And maybe Yusei was going to set up against the Black Witch, the Black Rose Witch, for the next episode of duel. Boom, that gets interrupted. So, but we had, even though there wasn't any duels, we had a huge amount of points that I think to be highlighted. The first thing I want to start on before we get to the story is the animation of this show continues to be top notch in my opinion, and I believe this episode showcased then 2 great shots. One was when Jack is sitting in his apartment and Godwin is there with one of the assistants that really serves Jack. I forget the name. And he's talking about, like, oh, you know, the Fortune Cup and what's coming up, and he's thinking about his own reflection in himself and what it means, and that Yusei is going to be there and all that stuff. And I assume in that moment he was also thinking about, hey, let's make this as fair as possible. I'm going to go visit Yusei to give him back Stardust Dragon, which I actually forgot that he had from the last time that they dueled inside the stadium, and then he ended up with that card. I totally forgot about that. But it's a great shot where you see his reflection in the cup of coffee that he looks like he is drinking, and then it cuts away back to actually his face. I thought just little things like that I thought were fantastic animation. Really looks really cool, and I like the kind of the symbolism that it causes in that moment. And then you also have a shot where after he visits Yusei, and also too the coffee shot is, he says quench my thirst. His quench his thirst is what Godwin said of why Yusei is there, and that is symbolism, obviously, because that's why you would be drinking something, usually to quench your thirst, is the typical thing. But then after he visits Yusei, when he leaves, there's a great shot as well of him riding his D-wheel down the highway, and I just think it looks so crisp and so 3D lifelike. It's just a really, really great shot. So I thought it was important to first just call out some of the animation there that I thought was very top-notch in this episode. The story itself, you know, we kind of kick off with Yusei really has created like an entire like little gang, a little friendship gang, which I really like. You know, he's got Saiga still helping him out there and setting him up for a place, you know, to be before the Fortune Cup, and saying like, hey, you know, security's tracking you, I'm sorry about that. And Yusei really doesn't care. He's not only confident, but he knows what's on the line. He knows that they're watching him. And I like this group that he has Saiga, he has Himuro now, and Grandpa there coming back. And he has, you know, I guess he has Luca and Lua. You know, they'll come more, especially Lua at this point. They'll come more into the story. It seems like he is setting up that he has his friends back in Satellite, including Raleigh. So Jack makes a point later to say, like, he views it as a negative of like that, oh, you're basically never going to rise above your station of being a Satellite person associating with these people. But I think it's quite the opposite. I think the way you say things is, there's strength in numbers, and there's strength in relying on your friends and relying on people that trust you, and the bonds that you build. I think those can become unbreakable and are way more reliable and strong in moments of stress and sacrifice than anything that Jack or Godwin at the moment can. Now, Godwin maybe means to be seen because it seems like he's part of some like cult, so there are probably strong ties there as well, but you would imagine people of that kind of stature, especially as the king, as Jack, a lot of the people that work for you are probably higher. They're not going to have the same loyalty as your friends, as these strangers that Yusei has befriended, and I really think that becomes a benefit and a strong quality of his character, and I think Jack is viewing it in the typical kind of arrogant way of Jack, but almost in a naivete way, as someone as intelligent and talented as he is. But once we get there, we cut back to Lua and Luca. It seems like they're going to be a major part of the show, which is not entirely shocking. They were introduced last episode. From the end of episode 12 was where you first see them, and then really introduced last episode in 13, and they're already in the opening. So you would imagine that they're going to play a large part. This episode kind of makes me think that possibly, and this might sound crazy to no one, this, you know, someone who's never watched this, and I have no idea, but like, is Lua a signer as well? Like, he seemed to have a little reaction there of Yusei's kind of tattoo when the Crimson Dragon was out, and I assume it was out below, kind of in that basement monolith, you know, pyramid area that Godwin showed Jack a few episodes ago, and because we didn't actually see it appear in the sky, but that's how Yusei, you know, was in pain and the tattoo lit and all that happened. Is Lua one of those, or is he just kind of fascinated by the tattoo? It could be the latter, 100%. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I kind of had some feeling there. It seems like right now our signers, I think there's supposed to be 6 or 7 of them. No, there's 5. There's supposed to be 5 of them. We know Jack is one. We know Yusei is one. This Black Rose Witch obviously is going to come into play. It seems like she is one as well. I have no reason to believe that the story would be misleading or lying. So we got 3 out of her 5 right now. I would say definitely confirmed in 2, but I would say Black Rose Witch here is the 3rd one. I don't think she's lying there. So that's an important story point that happens. And when we meet Lua and Luca, and I forgot that Yusei left in the middle of the night, and they discovered their customized dual discs, and for some reason Lua can't say that correctly throughout the episode, and that demonstrates that he's the one that's more gung-ho and loves dueling and has that energy, but he's not the mature side of Luca and is way too trusting, and Luca is the one who's a little bit more steady of like, hey, remember, this is a guy from Satellite that has a mark. I think she's going to trust him more as time goes on. And then we cut back to really just Saiga and Yusei talking. If Dylan is listening to this, the thumbnail shot for the 3rd of the thumbnail for the 5Ds review better be Yusei. It better be Yusei showing the guns off there when he's just got the tank top on, because that's got to be an iconic shot here for this episode. I don't know if you guys agree with me with that, but that was really, really funny. I like that Saiga, again, talking what I did earlier about the bonds that he has created. He's going to sneak out and risk his own freedom and possibly his life to go check on Yusei's friends, who he doesn't even know. He doesn't even know Yusei that long, and that shows the power, this magnetic energy that Yusei creates. I think is incredibly fascinating and incredibly powerful, and I think as a viewer, it makes me magnetic to what he's about to do and what's going on. When we go to the King's apartment, I talked about the shot early, but the one point I wanted to put in here is he says it's a lame event, and as soon as he says the man from Satellite Goblin says, he already knows it's Yusei, and he's interested, and this talks about the character of Jack and really how he views himself, but hey, listen, he's a dick, right? I mean, we've seen that before. We see that here, that he's already gone against Himuro, and probably, I think he ruined his career, they said a few episodes ago. He doesn't acknowledge him, the grandpa, Saiga, nobody. Kind of just gives them a look that kind of starstrucks, but slightly terrifies them as well. But he is a guy that is fair, and he wants to win when everything is properly level, and that's why he gives back Yusei to Stardust Dragon, so there's no excuses, there's no way, and he wants to win fair and square. I like that as the antagonist, and I would imagine he is the rival he's going to be for the duration of the show. That's what they're setting up. That is something that I can appreciate in the quality of him, and also, he's not as naive as I think Godwin really thinks he has him wrapped around his finger, and now that might be so at the moment, but the King, I believe in him through 14 episodes that he is going to continually dig deeper, as he always keeps asking. He asked again here, what is the director planning? Whether that assistant knows or not, or is just playing dumb, remains to be seen. But I always like that he is digging in those moments. And then I talked already about the scene of Jack coming to visit Yusei. I really, really like that scene. Of the one part to also pick from that is Yusei immediately, and in a little bit of an angered but measured way, says, like, I assume you're the one that gave the information about my friends, and that's why they're being threatened. Jack didn't. Jack did not. He had no idea about that information, and that also shows his character, that he's not, at the moment, he's above that stuff, and he's not going to be threatening innocent lives. He can get to Yusei if he wants to. He doesn't need to threaten his friends to do that, and Yusei and him have enough rivalry that Yusei is probably going to take that challenge of dueling him every single time. We've seen that all the way back in, episode 4 and 5, when they were in the duel stadium as it was. And he says a final parting word, and he just says, oh, the next time, I'll come to see you. You're going to have to come to me. I came to you, which I like. That's a little bit in fairness as well. And he talks about the Crimson Dragon, and that there's more to say about the Crimson Dragon coming. It is only the beginning. So he has to be ominous. He has to be, of course, he can't give us all the detail, but he doesn't know all the detail. But that piques Yusei's interest and is a little bit terrifying for the prospects. We go to Godwin, as I said, underneath the temple, and he's with a whole bunch of cult leaders basically saying we need to track down the other signers. It seems like we have 3 or 5 already, and he is deep in this religious, kind of crazy stuff. Then we meet an interesting place here where this is Dominion or something like that it's called. And it's basically a place where it's people who have been marked, so they're criminals. They technically should be living in Satellite, but they don't want to live in Satellite. So they're kind of like the middle class or lower middle class, where they live on the outskirts of Neo Domino City, but they're not allowed in the city, but they don't go back to Satellite. I thought that's an interesting part of world building, of how this world persists. You see it's a very rundown area, but these people still probably either view themselves as better than Satellite people, or they feel like there's more opportunities here. So I thought that was pretty fascinating as well. And then we see that, Lua and his friend there, was a Tempeh or whatever. They're talking about the witch, and that they're saying that everything that the character does with her monsters, with her traps, affects you in the real world. It's just not part of the game. So it doesn't seem like that's a legend, considering what we see there at the end of the episode. Lua runs into into Yusei. They talk, his arm starts burning, and then the witch appears, and that's where you get the U2 shot, and we're going to get our signers start meeting up. And the final shot we get at the end is the cup setting up, the Fortune Cup. It's about to start. We're going to get a little bit of a tournament arc there. I think it was the Damien or Damon area. That's the area with the satellite citizens. And I hate that little assistant, that little boy that works for Godwin was watching over the Black Rose Witch appearing. And Godwin says the signers will gather under the protection of the Dragon Star. So the idea is maybe the other 2 signers are already at this tournament, but Godwin is trying to get all the signers there for a reason, I would assume, in one place to summon the Crimson Dragon. So we're not only getting a tournament arc here coming up, but we're going to get some heavy plot stuff that could lead to danger. I mean, we've seen what it has done to the city before when the scientists were working on it. Does it create the same kind of level of destruction and danger, or worse this time again? So guys, that's kind of my thoughts here on episode 14 of Yugioh 5Ds. Great episode, really enjoyed it. There was not a single actual duel that went on. We saw some background duels, but no one between main or side characters. They were interrupted 2 or 3 times there, but it wasn't needed because there was a lot of heavy plot here and setup moments getting ready for the Fortune Cup. Let me know what you thought of this episode down below and the previous 2 episodes of Duel Monsters and GX. I would love to hear your thoughts. If this is your first time stopping by the Legacy Reviews, as I always say at the beginning and the end of these, please, this is my first time, so please do not spoil any of the episodes in the comments, because I love to talk to you guys and read all of those comments and upvote them and do all that stuff, but I can't do that if you guys provide spoilers, so please refrain from doing that. I would greatly appreciate it. Stay tuned to the channel here at Yugioh Everything for other videos that Dylan has coming out all the time. We do a weekly podcast on Wednesday nights of 7's Up, the current Yu-Gi-Oh show, the 7th show going on right now. So if you're interested in that, please check that out and any of the other content that is provided by Dylan. He is great. I love you all, and I will talk to you later. And as always, thank you for watching. Wow.